Gang, 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 gang. Gang, gang. I hope you are very well. We have a black coffee from BP, no less. Terrible coffee, but I ran out of Nespresso pods this morning. And we are gonna sit back, relax, maybe not necessarily me, but I'm basically gonna walk you through my push and quad focused day. I did say that I'm going to go through basically every single day of my split and basically explain like the rationale behind programming, and then I'll do an overall vlog behind like why it's all constructed that way. So basically this is like 5 vlogs on number 1, my training split walkthrough, and then I suppose like an overview of why we've actually programmed in this way and what like the general goal is for the future. So let's get me from big to small, and we'll go now. So we are starting off with the treadmill. Reason being is quite simply, a lot of my work I do in the morning, and then basically I send check-ins off. What was happening, especially in prep, was I was running in between sets, like for example, like calf raises. In between sets, I would basically send off check-ins. I've decided not to fucking do that in this off season. So what we're doing is basically, I suppose like doing all my check-ins in the morning, or some check-ins in the morning. Definitely not all of them at the minute. And then basically just warming up on the treadmill. That's all I really need to do, is like 10 to 15 minutes on the treadmill, just to get some steps in, just to get warm, and then I can mentally prepare for my session. I also take my pre-workout then as well. First exercise of this push and quads was calf raises. You didn't really need to see too much of the calf raise, to be honest, because it's boring as shit. But yeah, we have 3 sets of that in a 10 to 20 rep range. We then move on to a leg extension. I was really toying between this and the Kaiser. Now, yeah, the coach has Kaiser kit in there at the minute, which is basically like, I suppose, like air driven, and you could, it's very hard to explain actually, but basically you can like manipulate the kind of like tension via like these buttons basically. So if you want more resistance, you can obviously push the button in. If you want less resistance, you can push the button out. And I suppose like, why is that decent? It's like, you got to think with like prime equipment, you are, I suppose, like loading in the lengthened, mid, short, etc. Whereas as like the Kaiser, you can actually do this real time. So you can really load in the lengthened, and then when you feel like you're failing on something like a back row, for example, you can then like loosen off the air and then just get short. Same thing with a leg extension, for example. You could really load in the lengthened, and then you can like drop off in the shortened. So really fucking good bit of kit, but for now we're just going to run on the flex. We then go into our, I suppose, like pushing element. So right now we're basically just warming up. We went through calf raises, we then went through 3 sets of leg extensions, and now we're going on to delts, 3 sets of this as well. These are really fucking blowing up my delts in the minute. So yeah, very happy with that. We've made our first adjustment in terms of the split already. We've gone for a high incline Nautilus. Now, I actually had this session, rotation 1, in Kratos, and I did a Smith press, and the Smith press went very well. However, I did notice like a couple of days later, my kind of like where I tore my pec, it was very sore and inflamed, and I was like, I'm just not gonna risk it for the sake of, I suppose, like, I see people on social media doing like high incline Smith press, and in prep I'm like, I really want to do that again. And I know that I'm strong there, I just know that I'll ping it. Where did I ping, I suppose, my pec last time? It was on the Smith press, so like, it was a bit of like fear of missing out, but the reason why I came to the coach is quite simply they had this machine here, which is basically like a Nautilus plate loaded high incline press, and a slight, I suppose, like converge movement, which is basically like from like out to in, right, into the midline. Yeah, it doesn't put too much tension on my, I suppose, like my pec tear, right, my injury. So that's the rationale between the switch basically. So we then move on to a neutral press, which, to be honest, I'm using it for a couple of things. Number 1, obviously pec stimulus, right? Our, I suppose, like pec loves being tight to the torso rather than being outwards, right? So there's that. But also, I'm actually using this for tension towards my tricep. I'm actually using this as like almost like a direct tricep movement. So I am working triceps later on this, I suppose, workout. However, one thing that was very noticeable as I came down in prep this time was quite simply my triceps just faded towards the end. They are quite juicy and quite big in like the off season, and then I suppose like the first 12 weeks of a prep. But as we go down the line, they just lose it. And the same with my biceps. So we are obviously planning to increase the size of both. So yeah, I basically pushed in, I suppose, a little bit of like indirect work to triceps via something like a neutral press, and of course it really lights up the chest as well. This is my favorite fucking movement of all time. I had this in last off season. I pulled it out because I was in a gym that probably wasn't that hygienic on the floor, so I didn't really want to lay there. But now we're in the coach again. Yeah, obviously it's carpeted, so it's more hygienic. So anyway, yeah, we're basically doing this. You have to understand when we go like behind, I suppose like behind the back, that's working like more the lengthened. This is actually working more so like the mid and the shortened. So understand like right about like where I'm in this position here, there's actually not too much tension, but as I kind of like progress out, there's just more and more tension, which is obviously good. So we're working both the lengthened position and then we're working like the shortened position, right? So if I did it the other way around, when I'm doing like the behind the lat raise situation, I wouldn't be able to get like up here basically, because my delts are so fucked. But between the two, yeah, they're really blowing up my my delts at the minute. We then move on to a machine skull. I'm very undecided with this, to be honest. I'm not gonna lie. It's one of them ones where it's super hard to set up. When it feels like decent, as in when you set it up decently, it feels great. But it's one of the ones where number one, it's a pain in the ass to get in, but it's also a pain in the ass to set up. And you might wonder, is like, well, why don't you just write down the numbers and stuff like that? That's not the issue. It's like, if you see the blue pad that my elbows are pushed on, that's actually not attached to the machine. So if that's off just a little bit, you kind of get a lot of like, I suppose, tension throughout the elbow. And then lastly, we go through a partial range superset. So yeah, that's basically all we do now in terms of like volume. We have 4 sets of triceps, 5 if you include this. Indirectly, I suppose you can add in another 2, which is 7. So yeah, I'm gonna run through all the like, I suppose, like volume numbers and stuff like that in a kind of a wider vlog. But right now, this is basically how I'm executing it. But this is how I think we should practically apply length and position work. A lot of people are doing like this really like length and position situation. They're just going into these like partials and stuff like that. I think the majority of your work should be non-partial, and then essentially at the end, I think that we should go through like partial range of motion, right? It's like with the same with my pull and hamstring day, you saw like the low lat row. Me at the end of my like back work, right, I was then doing like, I suppose, like reverse drop sets, which is like the length and position. I think the majority of your work should still be, I suppose, like just going to the gym and just acting normally, right? I think that a lot of people are very much going like the whole length and position. It's like, no, you just do some of it. But that was pretty much the push and quad day. If you have any questions, of course, hit them via the comments or DM me on Instagram. Again, I'm going to do a vlog where I'm basically just going to talk about everything as a whole, talk about exact volume numbers and stuff like that. But yeah, it's one of them things where I'm not too fussed about like volume numbers per week. I'm just more worried about like, is this session effective? Am I recovering from it? Could I do more? Could I do less? And then go from there. I think some people are so fucking tied up with how many sets of like this shall I do per week. It's like, just try it and then just see if you are growing, and then if you're growing and recovering, then great. If you feel like you could do more, then push in more. If you feel like you could do less, then do less, right? I think people are so tied up with this like 8 to 12 volume number. It's like, I think my hamstring volume, I think, is like 3 or 4 sets per week, and they're growing. So yeah, you just have to be emotionally attached to quality of sets rather than how many sets should I do to gain muscle, right? Anyway, I'll leave you there. That was my push and quad day. Next vlog is obviously going to be the pull and hamstring day, the second variation of it. The vlog after that is basically going to be the push and quad, the second variation of that. And then the next vlog after that is going to be just an overview of everything. Anyway, hope you all. If you have any questions, Instagram comments, or no, Instagram DM or YouTube comments, and I'll see you soon. All right.